How's canvassing been going?
It's been going well.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Do you enjoy doing that?
I do actually. It always takes me a little bit of like a mental leap to just get out the door. It's like I don't know.
That first push.
Yeah, just getting out the door, leaving my dogs, leaving my cozy home, but I enjoy it. Yeah.
What's the general sentiment out on the streets?
Very positive.
Well, that's a plus.
I mean, it could be that I'm mostly targeting sounds bad, but I'm going to homes with likely supporters at this stage in the campaign, at least, because I'm really trying to get those votes at in the final hours.
Just get everybody motivated.
Yeah.
Say, okay,
Yeah, exactly.
that
Yeah.
ballot that's sitting on your table might want to start thinking about filling that
Yeah.
out.
Early on, I was reaching out to more people and just like a more diverse cross section of the community. But now I'm like my Natalie voters. I'm like,
Honing
hey,
in.
don't forget to vote for me.
Don't forget about me. I'm still here.
Yeah, totally.
Well, that's cool. And you get to talk to people and kind of see, okay, what's bothering you?
Yeah.
What is your biggest issue today?
Absolutely. Yeah.
What would you say is the biggest problem most people are concerned about now? I know we have a lot because there's COVID, there's inflation, but as far as your district, what's the big issue for everyone?
I would say housing has been the top one. So
Yeah, that's a key across
absolutely.
Eureka, right?
Yep. And it's like not just housing for low income folks, just housing across the board, middle incomes, high income earners, really housing across the board. Yeah.
What is your plan to tackle that? Do you have an idea of where you would want to start?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're lucky right now because the state has $100 billion surplus, which is pretty rare for
And a
at
pretty
least,
large amount?
yeah, it's an amount that's hard for me to fathom, but and really wants to sink a lot of funding into housing. So I think we need some public-private partnerships to really lead the way.
And they passed some bill or something where now you can subdivide lots a little more
Yes.
easy and you can build these duplexes on single family lots.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
I think that's a good step.
Yeah,
It'll be
so
interesting to see where that goes.
definitely. Yeah, the land use and zoning changes seem to be really significant. And the county and the city of Eureka have both made a lot of those changes. But now, one of the challenges for people to build those second units in their backyards, or, if you're subdividing and selling off a lot, that's one thing to someone who would like to build a home there. But if owners of single family residences wanted to convert like a garage or add another unit, there's not a lot of financing available for those. So people really have to be able to take out a home equity loan or a second mortgage, and that's just not available to everyone. So I think we need a financing program that's actually like government subsidized financing. And when I say subsidized, I don't mean that government would sink a lot of money into it, but just having a low rate for loans would be really important.
To help it get off the ground. Especially
Exactly.
now with
Yeah.
interest rates. 'Cause
Yes.
they're getting a little hectic.
They're going higher. Yes.
Yeah.
I know. Totally.
So because you were on the Eureka City Council
I
for two
still am.
terms. You
Yes.
still are.
Yeah.
You finish your last term, obviously, this year.
Yes.
What got you interested in politics?
When I bought my first home in 2013, I started looking into who was representing me. I had paid some attention to the Eureka City Council for years, but I wouldn't say I was like watching every meeting or honed into every single decision. It was just really kind of hit and miss when I was interested in something. And I had always kind of thought, frankly, it seemed to be a lot of people who were retired. And I know it only pays $500 a month. So I thought, it might be interesting to me, but I never really thought I could do it seriously, partly because of money. But when I bought a home and, I started looking into who was representing me, I realized that, I thought there could be some more choice for voters. So mostly I wanted, like the democratic process to be effective for people. I ran because the person that was in the seat was pretty openly denying climate change. And as a coastal city, I didn't think that was a great fit. And then, there was really only one person running. They had been appointed and they were running unopposed. So to me, that's just not democratic. So I wanted to make sure people had a choice.
Yeah, having a choice, having a plethora of candidates, I think is always a good thing.
Yeah.
Because then you get a wide berth of, okay, where does everybody stand on these issues and who aligns most with what I want and our direction? I think that's important.
And like in that race, we had two very different people with two really different directions. So I think it was really clear for people. There were only two candidates that first time. Then the second time I ran, there were three candidates. And then in this race now, there are three candidates. So people have lots to choose from.
And climate change seems to be right up your alley with the work that you've done, obviously. And you seem pretty passionate about that wind farm that they're implementing. What is your stance on nuclear energy? Do you have a stance on that yet?
Nobody's asked me that. I understand that it can be clean if managed well, but I'm too concerned about nuclear energy proliferation here in our region, in part because we're on a triple junction. We're so close to these fault lines, and I just think there's too much risk of tsunami and earthquake and other natural disasters in our region. So I'm not sure where it really is a good fit. I think it's just too hazardous potentially. And we've seen with, Chernobyl and what happened in Japan, just some ongoing concerns that I think outweigh the benefits.
Because that is really almost the best source of energy, right? In theory, if we could make it so that, these meltdowns don't ever happen, it seems like that would be the best way to go. I mean,
it would be amazing if we could make it perfectly safe 100% of the time. And I think that's just, we're not there yet with the technology. I'm a Trekkie. I love Star Trek. So, if we could get to that level with our reactors, that would be great.
Yeah.
They're always having meltdowns on the Enterprise. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the best example, right? They always seem to have something going wrong.
They do.
I don't know enough really about nuclear energy to delve too far into that. I just wanted to get your take. Because it seems like a lot of people that are pro green energy, that's kind of their line in the sand is, yes, we need to start moving that way, but nuclear is that's still off the table.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also not an expert. I just, from what I understand, just my reading on it, which honestly hasn't been at a very deep level, I just, I'm concerned about the nuclear material that, was in Humboldt Bay and is still, close at hand here. And, so I just think we need to advance a little in our technology before we do more nuclear proliferation in general.
Yeah, that's the big thing, is make sure that the technology gets there.
Absolutely.
Before we get buck wild. I think it is a good step. I think that would be the best option down the road. I don't know if we're quite there yet, but I think it's something to keep an eye on.
It's certainly something that, I wouldn't be closed to. I know some people just say, like, absolutely never, no nuclear proliferation whatsoever. If we get to the point where the technology is safer, then, I certainly think it's worth exploring. Yeah.
Is there you mentioned nuclear waste in the bay. Is that a pretty significant problem? I haven't heard about that.
The Humboldt Bay power plant used to be a nuclear plant, and now it's not. Now it's a natural gas-based plant. But there's still some nuclear material in the area. It's stored really carefully, but there were some concerns in the past about leaks and safety and security. I know when they were removing some of that material, I actually helped with a wetland restoration project really close by, where we actually had to do soil testing to make sure there was no hot soil, which thankfully there was not. But it was interesting to, there were armed guards, like lots and lots of armed guards there, because they were concerned about, the material getting in the hands of the wrong folks. So it was kind of interesting to be on the site. And I was just out there, planting wetland plants and going about my day. And, here there are 20 armed guards in the bushes.
Yeah. That's another thing with nuclear, right? Is it's not exactly, you can't just walk onto the property and take a look at it.
Exactly.
You gotta be a little more careful.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I knew that it used to be a nuclear plant. I didn't know that it was converted.
Yeah, it was just a few years ago. I don't exactly remember what year that took place. It might have been more than a few years ago, but about 10 years ago, I'd say.
So you've been pretty involved just community-wide then.
Yeah,
Starting
definitely.
out on the city council, being involved, you were with the Redwood Community Action Agency?
Yeah.
That seems like that's been a big part of where you've come from.
Definitely. Yeah. I've worked there for about 16 years now. So it's a nonprofit based here in Eureka. And I'm always careful to say that when I'm interviewing and talking about things with my political hat on, that I'm not representing our CAA.
Got to throw that in there.
Yeah,
right?
I always try to get that in there. But yeah, it's been a huge part of, my development as a person. And I've gotten to work on a ton of cool environmental projects, transportation planning projects, community health projects. So it's been really awesome.
Do you feel like that's kind of lined you up now to go into this bigger position of being a city council member?
It has.
Or county supervisor, not a city council member.
I forgot to ask if I can take a break to blow my nose.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We're live, but yes, you can definitely blow your
Okay,
nose.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
It'll just be a moment.
It's just me. I'll just fill in the dead air.
Okay.
We're kind of working out the kinks. I've just started doing these live episodes,
Yeah.
especially now with all these candidates coming on. I wanted to make sure I could help them get whatever they had to say out there. Because obviously, if this comes out after the 7th, that would be a little awkward.
That would be,
Yeah.
no, this is great. Thanks for making time to do it before
Yeah,
the
no,
election.
thank you for coming on. I was very
Yeah.
excited to chat with you, kind of pick
Totally.
your brain and see where you stand.
Totally. Yeah. So, I mean, my work at RCA has been, so for the first few years, I did a stormwater protection project. So really helping protect water quality in Humboldt Bay. And now I'm focused mostly on trails and transportation planning. So I don't work on any projects in the city of Eureka. I work on everything outside of city limits to avoid any conflicts of interest. But it's been really cool. And I've learned a lot about working closely with the county, actually. I've worked with a lot of different county departments in that capacity, too.
So why the jump from council member to supervisor?
Well, I'm termed out this year. So actually there's some question about whether myself and Kim Burgell are termed out because there was some redistricting and our wards changed. So I think the intent of the law is that you can only do 2 back-to-back terms.
8 years total.
Yes, 8 years total, back-to-back. And there have actually been some people who have left, done something else for a few years, come back and done another term.
Oh, so you could do more terms.
I could down the line
Okay.
if I really, really wanted to. But at this point, I recognize that the intent is to have 2 back-to-back terms total. So I'd like to move to the county and see if I can do some good there. Yeah.
What would you say has been your greatest accomplishment working for the city?
Ooh.
That's a loaded question, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, can I pick 2?
Yeah.
Okay. There've been a lot, but I would say that the most, I think, well-known accomplishment of the city council during my time has been the return of Tuluwat to the Wiyot tribe, which happened a few years ago. And that was really something that both myself and Councilmember Burgell worked really hard on in different ways and kind of through our networks. And so that was a huge honor. And people from all over the world have actually asked us for input about how we did that and what the process looked like. And then one of the other big changes that is in the what I call the boring but important category is the update of our city general plan and then our zoning code, because that's going to really shape what the community looks like in the future. And I think we're not yet seeing all the impacts of that, but we will over the coming years where, people can now subdivide their properties or build more housing or have neighborhood markets, things like that. So it's a lot more flexible and modern updated zoning code. So I'm excited about that.
Are you at all worried about stepping into this supervisor position with the current state of the county where you have the auditor controller situation, you have the county budget, which is a problem. You have all these issues that are kind of hitting their peak right now and you're going to be walking in, hitting the ground running. I can imagine that would be a little alarming, at least from an outside perspective. I would be kind of shitting my pants a little bit.
Yeah, I could see that. It's a little unnerving. Honestly, it's a tough time to be jumping in, but I think somebody, has to do it who has a lot of passion for the community. And I also have a really, policy-minded approach to things. And I like to think I'm very strategic and thoughtful about my decisions. So I think it's important to have somebody good in there, even when times get tough. And I know times are pretty tough right now. I mean, we've been through a global pandemic. We have, we're short-staffed in every, government agency. Pretty much they're all short-staffed. So,
crazy, right?
I know it's a wild time. So, I mean, unemployment is at all-time lows. We have a serious housing shortage. There are budget concerns. So there's a lot going on. But I'm not going to say I have the solution right now for every single issue, but I think I have an approach that'll be really effective.
I think that's the honest answer, right?
Yeah.
If you're sitting there saying, I've got this answer, this is how we're going to do it, I'd be like, okay, but
yeah.
How does that actually pan out when the rubber meets the road?
Absolutely. And I really don't have all the answers. I do think I have a good head on my shoulders, and I like working closely with staff to solve problems and community residents to solve problems. So part of it is just thinking, if you're creative minded and have some internal fortitude and are willing to, sit down with everyone and say, like, how can we make this better? What steps can we take? I think that's what it takes to be an elected official.
Talk to me about the Coast Guard.
Oh, yeah.
I want to hear about that.
I love talking about the
When I
Coast
read
Guard.
that you're a reserve officer, right?
I
When I
am,
read that, I
yes.
was like, okay, we're definitely going to touch on that.
Okay.
What was the motive to enlist? Which was back in 2012?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Yes, I enlisted in 2012. I did apply to officer candidate school to be an active duty coastie. And some of that was just what was going on in my life at the time. I was ready to make some big changes. And I didn't get picked up the first time to be an officer. So I enlisted as an enlisted member, and I became a marine science technician. And a big part of that was wanting to serve my community here at home, right here on Humboldt Bay. At the time, I was willing to move and to be sent anywhere to do whatever mission the Coast Guard had in store for me. But when that didn't pan out, I just decided I would serve here at home. And marine science technicians do water quality protection and enforce federal regulations. And so I learned a ton through that. And I also got a lot of leadership training that was sort of a different type of leadership than I experienced in Humboldt, which is, I would say, like, learning about leadership in Humboldt is a lot more collaborative, and learning about leadership in the Coast Guard is a lot more hierarchical. So it's like, how do you influence other people to achieve a goal? How do you work within this hierarchical system? And then last year, I went to officer candidate school finally and became an officer. So now I'm actually not stationed in Humboldt. That's the downside. I'm stationed in Novato. So I go down once a month to Novato to serve.
Well, congratulations on that. That's
Thank
huge.
you. Yeah, it was really awesome.
Yeah, I think I'm a big fan of just the military in general and that line of service. And I think part of me believes that in order to serve in the public field, you should almost have to go through some sort of military career just to kind of get your feet wet.
Absolutely.
And then the people know, okay, there's a better chance you're not in politics for the money, right? Because you've already done some self-service, and then you come out and say, okay, I think I can do something.
Absolutely. Yeah, I concur. It's always, I actually feel like all of our presidents should have to serve in the military.
Seems like it'd be a good litmus test, right?
Yeah, or some form of national service that's really kind of part of an organization that isn't just about you as an individual and your own, kind of goals and aspirations and profits. It's really nice to see that in others, and I'm certainly the only candidate in this race who has military service under their belt. So, but I think it's important, and it demonstrates a lot about character. And it's, going through boot camp is something that, unless someone's experienced it, it's like really that it kind of breaks you down and builds you back up, and again, in a way that's hard to explain to folks. But I'm glad you appreciate it.
Yeah, I think more people should, just because it is very important.
Yeah.
I think that is an aspect of society that a lot of people kind of just brush to the side in some regards. We're all thankful that people do sign up, and then that never really translates to anything.
Yeah. Well, and I think there are other avenues too to demonstrate, commitment to community.
Yeah, you could do public service. You could they have those volunteer programs where you go to another country and help build. You could be a part of the Job Corps. You could do other things. Yeah. I think it's just that public service that matters before you start, because supervisors make $95,000.
Somewhere around there,
there, which is kind of a jump from 500.
It is, I mean, 500 a month to
not crazy,
like
but
8,000 or something, so that's kind of interesting.
And I think you can get into that realm where people go into politics just for the money.
Yeah.
And then we have problems.
Yeah, I would say that it's definitely going to be a change for me to leave. I actually have 4 jobs, and and a lot of volunteer service commitments. So it's going to be a change to go from that to one primary position.
Are you going to be dropping all those other positions? Or are you going to
I won't. If I'm elected, I wouldn't stay at Redwood Community Action Agency, and I also teach at Cal Poly Humboldt, so I would not be able to continue teaching either. So. We'll see. Yeah, I love all those hats that I wear in the community, and it's really fun to just fill all those roles. But I definitely would be setting those aside so that I can focus exclusively on representing District 4.
Yeah, it seems like it would be a big time commitment, right?
Yeah, definitely.
You don't want to spread yourself too thin.
Exactly. And that's actually one of the things, that's another major motivation for me in running for supervisor, is just to be able to spend the bulk of my time, all of my time really representing the district, because there's so much as a council member. It could be a full-time job. It's just that I have to pay my bills.
Yeah.
I'm not independently wealthy or already retired. So, that's something that I look forward to spending my time to do.
Yeah, it's crazy that they only make $500 a month.
Yeah.
I don't know what their price rate should be, but $500 seems kind of low.
Yeah. The mayor makes 900. So if anyone out there is wanting to run for mayor, it's a slightly more well
Little bump.
compensated position.
Not as much as county supervisor, but you got to take what you can get.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be hard dropping those other hats to kind of just assume one role, though.
Yeah, I think it'll be a big change in my identity because I'm, even though, essentially I'm a full-time politician, when people see me in the community, it's like they're never not thinking, oh, that person's a city council member. Not that everybody recognizes me, but you know what I mean. I'm never really taking that hat fully off, but I think I get the experience of doing other things in my life as part of my job, and so that's really rewarding. So it'll definitely be a change in my identity. One thing that I think is really important about compensating elected officials is that if you want good people to run from a diversity of perspectives and backgrounds and ages, you really do have to compensate them. Like, I think $500 a month for Eureka City Council is far too low. We're the county seat. We have a lot of big issues that are time consuming, and I think that they should be compensated a little more, and not, because they're in it for the money, but just so they can spend more time on it.
Yeah. What do you think it should be? Do you have a price in mind?
I mean, at least double. Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, when I was first elected, my income has gone up a bit since then, but when I was first elected 8 years ago, that $500 a month was a really big deal to me. And it still is. It's not a drop in the bucket. But at least double that seems appropriate. But that would have to be decided by the voters.
I would imagine it's not quite as demanding as a supervisor position, but it seems like there would still be a lot of work involved.
Yeah, I mean, the population of District 4 is roughly equivalent to the population of the whole city of Eureka. It's just shaped differently. It includes, Samoa and portions of Myrtletown. So it's certainly representing a similar population, I would say, even though the city has 5 wards. So I guess you could say it's a smaller population. But, I think many of the issues are similar. It's just everything's kind of scaled up on the county level. Like, the budget is significantly larger and the number of employees and, a lot of the contract negotiations are more complex, things like that.
What would you, if you had to guess how much time you spent in that role when you were a council member of like your total day, what would you say it was? 30%, 50%?
It varies so wildly. Yeah, I would say, honestly, an hour to 2 most days, and then when we have a council meeting, it's like 8 hours.
Yeah, all day.
and a lot of the preparation before, so a lot of times it's like weekend preparation for a Tuesday council meeting, because we'll get the agenda usually on a Thursday. Then you have Friday to kind of make some calls or meet with people about items that are on the agenda, and then the weekend to really read the whole packet, because it's a ton of information. Sometimes there's reports that are really thick. And I'm not going to lie, it's not always possible to read every single thing in great detail, but you really want to be familiar with what you're voting on. And then another work day before the council meeting. So it's really, I would say that those weeks are a lot more jam-packed.
Yeah.
So an average, it's hard to say. People ask that a lot, and I should actually tally it
for the rest of this year. It's hard to gauge how much work you put to something, right?
Yeah. Especially if you're like me, if you wear a lot of hats, you're like, sometimes it's not helpful to really tally how much time you spend, because it's exhausting to think about. So I just compartmentalize my jobs.
And you were a lecturer, environmental science and management?
Yes. Yeah. So I still teach a class every semester in environmental conflict resolution. So it's a class for environmental sciences and forestry majors, and it's required for a lot of them. And then some students take it as an elective, but that's less common. And so I usually have 35 or so students a semester, and I'll be teaching again this fall. So that'll be maybe my last semester. We'll see.
Is that a 3-4 credit course?
It's it's 3.3 teaching units for me. For students, I think it's 3. So They give me a little extra for preparation time. And then I'm also a graduate student.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that.
I'm a graduate student in the same department. And so I'm currently working on that, and I'll be taking classes this semester too. And I think I'll be done with the bulk of my coursework this fall. And I timed it that way, hoping that I would be done with almost all of it before having to having to take office.
How many more semesters do you think you have before that's done?
So I'll probably be working on my thesis, research this summer and fall, and hopefully just a little bit in 2023. Yeah.
Yeah, that lines out pretty well, right?
Yeah, I think so. I wish I'd started a semester or two earlier. It would have been nice, during the pandemic when people were home a lot, to be taking classes online, but I didn't quite jump on that ball fast enough. So here I am.
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't want to be, struggling as a member of the board and then also being like, I gotta go to class.
Yeah, I'll be done with class.
Yeah,
so there's
that'll
that.
be nice. You'll just be working on your thesis then.
Yeah, I'll be
Okay.
writing maybe in evenings or weekends. But yeah, I'll definitely devote plenty of time to being a supervisor.
How did you like teaching?
I love it. I really enjoy, I feel like it keeps me in touch with what people in their 20s are about. So it's actually fun. Being both a student and an instructor has been really interesting. Just I feel like I'm not always in touch with the student community otherwise, because even though there are a lot of students who live in Eureka and District 4, I don't have as many chances to interact with them otherwise. And so it's kind of nice, just to experience what people are seeing and perceiving in Humboldt County who come from outside of the county. And also seeing the trends in what students are studying and what they're interested in scholastically is really cool, because I think that's really insightful for economic development.
And you almost, kind of have your ear to the ground. You get to see, okay, what are the problems facing them, our students? Because Cal Poly, especially now that they're rebranding and going down that polytechnic path, that's going to be a major player in the economy, I would imagine, here coming up.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think that's huge to see, what are they liking about Humboldt? What are their challenges? What kind of, what in Eureka do they want to do? It's really cool to kind of hear from, they love to go to In-N-Out and Target and the Friday night market when that's happening. So it's certain things that students do or don't know about when it comes to the community is really interesting to me. But yeah, I mean, as we expand with Cal Poly Humboldt, I know that, there's plans to expand pretty significantly over the next few years. So I think that's going to be a lot of need and opportunity to really interface with Cal Poly Humboldt. And I think I have strong relationships in several different departments and among staff at different levels that can be helpful.
And that ties back into the housing problem, right?
Yes.
Which is huge for HSU, but I don't know if Cal Poly's done anything yet to address that, but that was a pretty significant problem. I watched some short documentary they put out online about all the kids just living out of their cars, and it was pretty shocking.
Yeah, I've had several students who have said that they were essentially homeless, crashing with different people or staying in their cars. So there are significant plans to build more housing on campus as well as off campus. So the city of Eureka is looking to partner with Cal Poly Humboldt to expand housing opportunities, but also research facilities. So there's a lot of change, I think, coming to our community with that designation change.
I think that'll be good.
Yeah, absolutely.
It seems like some of it is choice. Some of the kids don't want to spend the money on renting a place, and they'd rather just save it. But it seems like some of it is also not a choice, and they just can't afford it.
Yeah, I mean, so just like folks who are struggling with housing who aren't students, I think there's just so many different personal circumstances and financial reasons and cultural reasons why they do or don't find housing and, or avail themselves of resources in the community. There might be shelter space, for example, but if people don't feel comfortable there or don't feel like that, they're familiar or interested in that particular offering, they just won't use it. So, yeah.
I don't know how big of an issue homeless is in the 4th Ward, but in Eureka, in the outer area, it's pretty significant issue. Do you have a take on that?
Yeah, I would say it's very significant. I mean, so the 4th Ward includes the Samoa Peninsula, south of the bridge, so Samoa and Fairhaven, and the North Jetty area. And, I know there's ongoing challenges with folks camping, in the dunes and on the peninsula. So that's a need to address. And throughout Eureka, so the 4th Ward includes, most of Eureka north of Henderson Center, and then a little bump out down towards the old Jacob School site. and then, portions of Myrtletown. So I think when it comes to Myrtletown, I don't know, you live here, you might have a better sense of what it's like after hours at night. I spend a lot of time in Myrtletown during the day, so I don't see as much of the impact of homelessness in Myrtletown particularly. But what's it like at night?
I think it's gotten pretty bad everywhere.
Yeah.
I think it's gotten pretty bad everywhere.
Yeah.
It seems like, especially after COVID, it took a more dramatic turn and started climbing. You see a
Agreed.
lot more activity, and I don't know if it's just exacerbated now because the warmer weather's coming, and so they're kind of coming out a little bit more from the shelters, and
Yeah.
or just coming to the area more. But it's not great,
Yeah. Yeah.
and not great in the sense that a lot of it seems like it stems from mental health and drug use, especially
Yeah.
over here at least.
Yeah.
You see a lot of people kind of struggling walking around the street.
Yep. Definitely. I agree. And it's it's a problem all over the region. Not to pass the buck at all, but just to say, like, when I go down to Novato monthly, for example, it's,
Oh yeah, if you go down to LA especially, it's we're a drop in the bucket compared to that.
San Francisco, LA, even the smaller communities, but even like, Marin County is pretty fancy. A lot of the communities there are pretty I'd say it's very expensive to live there, and there are a lot of there's a lot of investment in the community from those who do live there, and there's still like a really visible problem. So, I think we're not alone in that. That's not necessarily comforting to people who've seen those changes in Humboldt and are frustrated by them. But we need to take a multi-pronged approach and collaborate with cities who have done things that are new or different from us. I think there are some communities who have built more permanent supportive housing, for example, for people who have severe behavioral health needs, and and potentially that overlaps with substance use. So we definitely need to see more of that constructed in our community.
Is that kind of the direction that you're leaning, is just more providing more housing?
Yes, but specifically permanent supportive housing, which includes services for people. And, there's also a need in our community for somewhere for people to go when they've left a facility like Supervisor, but they can't just be back out in the community.
Like a halfway house?
Something in the middle. Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, I think halfway house has a connotation.
Yeah,
that
not a good one.
Be,
yeah.
Might not always be the best. Essentially like a closed facility, or a partially closed and partially, outpatient facility where people can come to get services. So I know that there's a lot of focus on that right now on permanent supportive housing, but also like something a little bit more assertive than that for people who are conserved. So people who are in a state of conservatorship where someone else is temporarily making decisions for them because of their health needs. We really don't have a facility that supports those folks. And so what we've seen, or at least what I've witnessed, is, there are like veterans housing projects, and there are senior housing developments, and there are a number of services that Betty Chin provides. But those all have conditions, right? You have to be a senior, you have to be a veteran, you have to be on the path to being clean and sober, whatever the case may be. So that has meant that a lot of the people that are still out there in the streets are the hardest to serve. So that's what I see. I don't know about what you have observed, but it seems like it's getting worse because a lot of the people who are easiest to serve are getting into housing.
Mm-hmm.
So the people that are left on the street are like the ones that are the hardest to deal with, I would say, as a community.
They kind of fall through the cracks in those categories.
Yeah.
What do you make if that were to go through, that permanent supportive housing? Would you support drug restrictions on that, or your approach is more let them do drugs, just get them off the streets first, and then make it more rehabilitative for them? Because that's like the dual approach, right? And everybody's got one camp that they're in.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say I'm in one camp on that. I mean, I guess there's a part of me that's like, yeah, people should have to follow some rules. And then there's another part of me that's like, the impact on the community is so great if people remain on the street who have the highest need, right? Like it's trash, it's potentially needle litter, it's human waste. It's, the impact is so severe that, I guess I would fall somewhere in the middle. I would say that to try to move people towards using less, or not using or taking advantage of, medical intervention services and treatments would be ideal. But we got to get people into housing and off the streets because it's such an impact on our community in so many ways.
They have in San Francisco, they have an app that actually tracks homeless defecation. So okay, don't walk down that street because got hit pretty hard today.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the extent that it can get to, right? I don't know what the right answer is for that.
Yeah.
Because it's such a multifaceted problem. You have mental
is.
health, you have drug use, you have some people that are just in a state of anarchy and don't want to, bend to the system.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you see that for sure. And, it's hard for me to put myself in the headspace of someone who is like in that frame of mind, right? Like I can't,
especially for you where you went through a structured program like the military, it's gotta be a little culture shock.
Here are the rules. And I grew up in the military. So, there's a certain part of me that'll always be kind of like, here are the rules, I'm going to abide by them. And here are like the cultural norms that I'm going to abide by. I will say Humboldt County has very different cultural norms than like the family that I grew up in too. There's this sort of longstanding outsider culture that I think is really prevalent here, of people being like, I'm outside the system, the rules don't apply to me, a very kind of libertarian way of viewing the world. And so that's the system we're functioning in. So people are like, well, you need to conform to the rules, but it's like we live in this society here that's very different from, like, when I first moved to Humboldt, I lived in Petrolia, which couldn't have been more different than how I grew up. And it was in like the heyday of cannabis there. So it was like super rural, everybody has this kind of code where they look out for each other, but it was very different than the code that I grew up with.
You grew up in Florida?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was born in Miami, so to an Air Force family. And so we mostly lived in Florida, close to Air Force bases.
And then you went to school in Gainesville, and that's where you got your BA in poli-sci.
Yes, exactly. So I went to school at the University of Florida, and it was...
Was that intentional? Were you thinking, oh, maybe I could go into politics with this degree, or you were just...
I wasn't. I studied international relations and then moved to political science. And I went to school really young, so I don't think I started at 17, and I was like, I don't know what I want to do. So I just took courses that were interesting to me, which isn't necessarily the approach I'd recommend to all students, but it worked for me. So I got through my degree pretty fast. And by the time, like 2 years in, I was like, what courses have I taken? What degree could I make from these courses that I've taken? So I'm certainly interested in social science and political science and, international affairs, but also I was always really interested in that environmental side too.
Yeah, I think a lot of kids fall into that camp, right? They just go to school and they're like, I'll do some undergrad work, just try to get the rough stuff out of the way first, and then you hit your junior year and you're like, I don't know what I'm working towards yet. I guess we just got to plug and play and see what we can get out of those. Yeah,
and I just wanted to get a degree. I felt that I just wanted to get through that fast and then go see what I really wanted to do in the world and potentially, go back to school or do, take a different track later. And that's really what ended up happening. So
did you have to take out student loans to go to school?
I didn't.
This was before, but this was before the enlistment, right?
This was pre-enlistment,
okay.
Yeah. So I'm using my GI Bill now as a graduate student. I did not have to take out loans. I worked all through college. So I worked full time as like a pizza delivery driver and a bartender, and I did all these various things. And then I also had a little bit of GI Bill from my family.
What do you make of the whole student loan debate? As someone that has gone through and now earned the GI Bill, how do you fall on that topic?
I would love it if we could find a way to finance school for people, especially through their AA or AS degree, that first 2 years. I think that would be really beneficial. People would have the choice between training in the trades and, training in a more traditional kind of path to get a university degree. So a wide variety of options for folks. I wouldn't feel in any way, this is part of just like my way of looking at the world. If I had to pay for something and then the next person like gets that as a benefit, I'm like, good for you. I'm happy for them. I'm not like, oh, everyone has to suffer because I had to, work my way through
That's a weird mentality to have. A lot of people have that though.
Yeah.
Not just in student loans. It's in a lot of things of, no, I had to go through it, so everybody now has to go through it. We all have to suffer because that's the way it is. Yeah. I suffered.
Totally. Yeah. And I don't feel that way. I feel like, I don't have like a zero sum game way of looking at the world though. I'm like, there's enough pie for everyone. Like,
There's enough to go around.
Yeah. Or like enough if we plan our resources effectively. I don't have like a Pollyanna approach to the world either. I'm not like, oh, there's just endless resources. I know that resources are limited based on, my experience in figuring out how to allocate them, right? But to think that we could never provide that level of education for people in our, advanced rich world is silly to me. So I'd love to see us be able to do that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I know Biden's supposedly working on some stuff.
Yeah.
But I think loan forgiveness would be good, but I don't think it solves the problem if we
No.
leave those institutions in place where you can just rack up $100,000 in student loans
Yeah.
and then get out and spend the rest of your life working that off. I think that's a problem.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one thing that's interesting about student loans is that, so many people go into government service because there's this option for student loan forgiveness if you do a certain number of years of qualifying government service. And, so that can be with state institutions or other institutions. And I wonder how that would change people's willingness to work in those positions. I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions there for sure.
Did you notice when you enlisted, did you notice that being a motivating factor for a lot of people you went in with? Was that school aspect? I don't know the background of going into the reserve versus going directly into the military. I don't know if there's a difference between the benefits that you get or anything.
Definitely, yeah. So I've done about a cumulative 1.5 years of active duty service. I was activated for a year during COVID, and then between training and other like short-term activations, I've had about a year and a half of qualifying service. So I've earned like 60% of the GI Bill. I don't have 100% GI Bill because I've never been active duty. So there is a difference in that benefit for folks. But I think a lot of the reservists really did it because they love their community. Like the pay is fine. The pay is good. And the benefits are nice to opt into. But you do have to do like 20 years of service, or at least that's the commitment that I have is 20 years of service to even get like retirement benefits and things like that. So it's really more about like serving your community as a reservist. I think most people really are motivated by that. Active duty members get a lot of additional benefits. So if I were to go back and do it differently, I'd do 4 years of active duty. Yeah. Yeah. And if anyone was like considering like weighing their options, I always encourage them to do at least one tour of active duty service because, it just signs you up for a lot more.
Mm-hmm. You're automatically eligible then if you do 4 years for like the GI Bill
or whatever extent. Like one full term of services. It sort of varies between the different the Department of Defense and the Coast Guard, which is Department of Homeland Security.
Are the contracts the same for when you enlist as a reserve?
Ooh, I don't. My first contract was I think 4 years, but don't hold me to that.
How much time left do you have on your contract now?
Let's see. So I'm going on 10 years now. So I've got a full another 10 years. So I hope to make it to that upper echelon.
Oh, you're going to do the full 20?
Oh, yeah,
oh,
definitely.
Wow, okay.
I'm planning to do 20 years. Yeah. So I'll continue to be a reservist as a supervisor.
How does that work if you get called into service?
So the maximum service I would probably be called up for, and I would say never. It's possible that something different could happen. But usually for reserve officers, it's 28 days. So, and it's usually
terrible.
once per year. So they try to kind of limit the deployments for people, recognizing that reservists have civilian jobs too.
Mm-hmm.
So, and because I'm in civic leadership here, at least when I got called up for COVID orders, that was Title 10 orders, which means like involuntary. So it's like you're going no matter what. Most orders aren't that way. Mostly they'll see if it's possible for you to take those orders, and if so, then they'll send you. So it's nice. A lot of people want to take active duty orders.
What did you have to do when you were called in for that Title 10?
So I actually did contact tracing and COVID preparedness and ordered PPE and stuff like that up at Sector Humboldt Bay.
Oh, wow.
So I was able to stay home or like stay at my house with my spouse and my dogs and then go up there for kind of a day job. So.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it was good.
And how long was that? Was that 28 days, that one?
No, that was almost a year.
Oh, full year.
So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, then it's definitely beneficial that you were here, right?
Yeah, it's good that I was
It would have been awkward
here.
if they shipped you to the East Coast. And
I
said,
know.
all right, well,
Yeah, a lot of people did. It was an interesting time, especially in that first few months when there was a
when
lot of
nobody knew.
uncertainty.
Yeah.
Yeah, we weren't sure how bad it was going to be, like what the impacts were going to be, and yeah, it was an interesting time. But it was great to work at the air station. I got to know a lot of the pilots and the leadership here in Humboldt.
Yeah, what an experience, right?
That was cool.
I do want to just make sure. Okay, I just wanted to check our time because I know
Yeah,
you got to
totally.
be somewhere. Yeah, I think that's great. I think that arguably gives you some edge, at least in leadership, having to go through that.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's interesting. I think people have a very set perception of what I'm about as a leader. I think like where I fall on the political spectrum in particular, but I really think my lived experience is kind of all over the place, and I can see issues from a lot of different angles, and I've been part of a community of folks who I think are very honestly view the world in through a very conservative lens, and that works for me to kind of communicate effectively about that. So
where do you think you fall? Are you more center, more
I think
left?
I'm a little on the left.
Little left.
And part of that is my environmental background and my take on social issues, and I'd really like to see us be as inclusive and forward looking as possible about issues, and lean into technology advancements and things like that. I think that that's part of like my parents' view of the world, and a big part of mine. Really focused on education, and so a lot of the things that kind of are part of the left-leaning side of the spectrum are like really resonate for me. But I do have that military background, and and Coast Guard does law enforcement too, so I have that kind of
dichotomy going on.
Yeah.
Had to throw out a big word.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
What is your stance on guns?
On guns.
Yeah.
Well, could you be more specific?
Well, I left it kind of broad because I could see you being kind of a, second advocate because you had that military experience.
Mm-hmm.
But when people throw out the left-leaning thing, they always kind of go, so, we should restrict guns. And obviously with, not to get too political on this, though.
Sure.
It is a political podcast.
Yeah.
The Uvalde incident.
Of course.
Those mass casualty events always draw attention to guns.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to get your stance. Where's your stance on the Second Amendment, I suppose?
Well, I mean, so the Second Amendment, I guess I fall in the camp of like the Second Amendment was written and came about in a time when guns were very different. Gun technology was different, right? And so, I think it's always important to look at it through that lens. And it wasn't really speaking to the kind of circumstances that we have today. So with that in mind, I would say I support reasonable restrictions on guns, and that's always like with a big asterisk, right? Because what's reasonable?
Yeah, open to interpretation.
Yeah, I know that we have, mental health related restrictions on guns and
like red flag laws.
Yes, and like gun violence restraining orders, things like that. And I would love to see us have more like buyback programs, because I think I've actually talked to a lot of folks in Humboldt who have a gun that they don't want. And they like somehow ended up with it, or they don't want to admit how they ended up with it, where, I think there's a lot of, we've talked about that sort of like the outlaw vibe of Humboldt. There are a lot of people who would like to surrender a gun and don't necessarily feel like they have the clearest path to do that. So I'd like to see us do like buybacks and, no questions asked returns for guns to get some off the streets. I do know that we have a pretty significant issue with, with felons having guns in Humboldt. So, certainly more enforcement of that is important.
Do you think that's in relation to the drugs?
I think it is. Yeah. That, and, just it being kind of, I think we have a reputation as a place where people can go to escape the quote real world or the rest of the world, behind the redwood curtain. And, I think people come here who are often running away or escaping something. So.
Well, the Emerald Triangle branding is pretty enticing for a lot of the wrong elements. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think there's still that reputation too, that you can come here and get rich in the cannabis sector, which is increasingly less true, but it's having a more dangerous element now.
Do you think there should be restrictions in place for certain types of firearms? the common one is the assault rifle ban that's been thrown out, or assault weapons. I don't even know how they're branding it anymore.
I think that sounds reasonable. To me, that's within the realm of reasonable restrictions, but I would really want to talk more about kind of what people see as like the benefit of having assault weapons. Is it just like the right to arm themselves, or is it something more? I really would like to kind of dig into that a little more.
Now, for the Coast Guard, do you guys do any weapons training? Because you're not a combat based.
Yeah,
unit.
I don't carry a weapon.
Okay.
So I did in boot camp. I did, shoot a handgun. We did some basic marksmanship and gun familiarization, but yeah, we did a little firearms work.
Okay. I didn't know how that worked out with the Coast Guard.
Yeah, I mean, so there are like boarding officers and people who have a more law enforcement related job, and they certainly carry guns. But
okay.
Yeah, I haven't.
Okay. And as an officer, you don't have to carry a?
I do not have to carry a weapon.
Okay.
Nope. Yeah, in my particular job, I don't. So I think some of my perception on guns is that I didn't come from like a gun owning family. I didn't grow up like hunting. I've shot skeet before and it was really fun. So to me, like shooting a gun has only exclusively been like marksmanship and for like recreational purposes. So I think, part of my perception is just that like I'm not that familiar with them, and I don't personally see the need to have one because I didn't grow up in a family who was like, yep, you gotta have guns.
Mm-hmm.
So I fully admit that like my view of things is probably really skewed by that,
Well, I think that's a very honest answer, right? I think it gets dicey when you talk about guns.
It
People
does.
Always, yeah, it can get very uncomfortable, especially if there's a diehard talking about it,
Yeah.
in one way or the other. If they're very anti and don't see a need for them and think, and you can't make a judgment call on what is right and what is wrong because
It's tough.
it's another multifaceted issue where there are consequences to having a society with guns and there are benefits, and
Yeah.
it's like, where do you draw the line in that? And is there a line to be drawn?
Yeah. And I can see where people are coming from who feel that they have a right to be armed to protect themselves from unfair rules and being imposed on them. And that's why the Second Amendment came about, right? So I get that conceptually. I didn't really grow up in a culture where that was like really emphasized. So I will admit that I lean into the more peace approach and like, how can we bring people together to like collaborate on issues without necessarily feeling that that's what we have to turn to protect ourselves from each other. Because really we're talking about like residents protecting themselves from their government, and like how can we not have that division that's most important to me. So whether people have guns or not, I mean, I know it's their right, and I certainly would lean into approaches that encourage people to surrender weapons that they don't want. Or,
I think that's a great idea. Yeah,
that seems like low-hanging fruit.
A felon has a gun and he's like, I know I shouldn't have this, so we need to do something. Okay, let's go take it somewhere. Let's get that.
Yeah.
I think that would be beneficial.
That no questions asked, like just turn it in.
Just bring it. Yep.
Yep. Turn it in. And
Doesn't matter. Does it have a serial number or not? It's okay. Just bring it in.
Yeah.
I think that could be helpful.
Yep. Yeah. That seems like low-hanging fruit. So I'd like to, encourage us to pursue options like that. And you're right. It is a really hot button issue, and I'm a little hesitant to.
Oh no,
like,
not to put
go
you on
too
the
far
not
into
to
it.
put
It's
you
like,
on the
ooh,
spot.
gosh, I mean, like what. And I think so much of that is decided at a level that's like well above the county, right? There's relatively little that local government can do aside from, enforcement that is focused on getting guns off the street or buybacks or things like that. So those are the options available to us.
Yeah, I just had to ask with everything that's been going on. It's one of those issues where it's obviously you guys can't, do a gun ban.
Right.
At a city council level or a supervisor level, but I think in order to understand, your elected officials, it's important to kind of get a well-rounded opinion of them on where they stand in a variety of fields.
On all the big issues.
Yeah.
Just totally.
Just so you can get a perspective, because anybody can hit you with their lines of, oh yeah, like we need to do this and we need to do that, and sell you whatever they want to sell you. But when you move past that and start getting to these fundamental questions of who somebody is, I think that's very beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. And, our Constitution is sort of this sacred document. And like, it's always interesting to me when it's like people are constitutional purists because I mean, if you asked me if I like the city charter from 1940, I'd be like, heck no.
Yeah,
it's like
weird. We came up
it
with a
becomes
lot
so
of things
outdated.
that were not that
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And yet, yeah, there is that argument, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
It's
it's
an old
interesting.
document.
It's like a really old document. Our country's changed so dramatically since then. So we don't have to get into like what's bad about the Constitution. I mean, I think ultimately the founding fathers had some fantastic ideas there, but it's sort of like how much of a purist are you going to be about anything that sort of was a moment in time and represents the like intentions of that founding body. And I mean, I feel kind of the same way about the Bible, but don't get me started there.
Are you religious at all?
I grew up going to church. I definitely grew up in the Protestant tradition, and I don't currently go to church. But I would say I have. It's interesting. A lot of science. I was listening to this podcast that said a lot of scientists identify themselves as spiritual, and they really like derive a lot of meaning from the connection that they have to nature. And so I would say that's where I fall.
Yeah. I think that's valid. I think as you can find connection to anything. I don't think you need to go to a church to be connected with God. I think you can, or to even be connected with a God. You can just enjoy your life and be connected to your friends and your family. I think that's important. I think it's all about having people that you care about.
Yeah, and I heard Jared Huffman, Congressman Huffman, identify himself as a humanist, and I read up on that, and I was like, that's a really cool approach because it's about like doing good by your fellow person and being connected to others, and like making decisions that are centered around doing the best, the greatest good for the greatest number, essentially.
I could get behind that.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, well, Natalie, thank you. I had a great time talking with you. I really enjoyed that.
Thank
Do
you,
you
Nick.
have any last issues you want to plug, or plug where people can find your webpage, your stuff?
Sure, yeah. People can go to arroyoforsupervisor.com. So ARROYO for supervisor.com.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Natalie.